Jake Morrison stepped off the transport ship and felt his stomach drop as Ephraim Military Academy hung in space like a massive metal flower with rotating sections that caught the light from the gas. Giant below, everything here was bigger than anything humans had ever built, and Jake suddenly felt very small. The docking bay buzzed with activity. Alien cadets moved in groups, speaking languages that sounded like music or grinding metal. Jake recognized some species from the briefing videos. Back on Earth, the tall blue ones were Zephyrians with their 4 arms and elegant movements. The shorter reptilian beings were Draconians with silver scales that shifted color as they walked, and there scattered among them were the Aetherian elves, with their pointed ears and eyes that seemed to glow with inner light. Jake carried his single duffel bag and tried not to stare at the technology around him. Holographic displays floated in mid-air, without any visible projectors. Gravity seemed to work differently in different sections of the bay, and some aliens walked on walls as easily as floors. The air itself felt different, cleaner somehow, with a faint taste of ozone. A voice boomed across the bay, speaking in perfect English though. Jake could tell it was translated somehow. The words felt slightly off, like they were being adjusted as he heard them. All new cadets report to orientation. Hall 7 immediately. Jake followed the flow of aliens through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. The walls were covered in symbols and writing from dozens of different worlds. Some sections pulsed with soft light, while others showed star maps that rotated slowly. Jake tried to memorize the route but gave up after the 3rd turn. Everything looked the same yet completely different orientation. Hall 7 was enormous, with a domed ceiling that showed real-time images of space outside. Jake found a seat near the back and tried to blend in. Most of the other cadets ignored him, but he caught a few staring. Some looked curious, others seemed amused. One group of Zephyrian cadets pointed at him and made sounds that might have been laughter. The lights dimmed, and a figure walked onto the stage. Jake had seen Zephyrians before, but this one was different, taller, more muscular, with scars across her purple skin that spoke of real combat. Her forearms moved with precise military bearing, and when she looked out at the cadets, her yellow eyes seemed to see everything. "This is Instructor Kayla Vex," she said without introduction. "I have fought in 17 battles across 9 star systems. I have killed enemies with each of my 4 hands, and I have never retreated from a fight. You will call me Instructor Vex, and nothing else." She paused, and her gaze swept across the hall. When those yellow eyes found Jake, they lingered for a moment longer than the others. "You are here because your governments believe you have potential. Most of you are wrong. The Zephyrian Military Academy has a graduation rate of 12%. Those who fail either quit or are removed. Some are removed in body bags." Murmur went through the hall. Jake felt his heart rate increase, but not from fear. The thrill of challenge always made him feel more alive. "Your first test begins tomorrow," she continued. "The Crucible Chamber will measure your abilities, your courage, and your worth. Most species require 6 months of preparation before entering the Crucible. Humans will enter tomorrow." Jake felt every alien eye in the room turned toward him. The attention should have been uncomfortable, but instead he found himself sitting straighter. His grandfather had been a Marine, and his father had served in the army. The Morrison family did not back down from challenges. Orientation. Jake was assigned quarters with another cadet. The room was small, but efficient, with 2 sleeping alcoves and a shared study area. His roommate was already there when Jake arrived. She was an Aetherian elf with silver hair that fell to her shoulders and eyes the color of deep space. When she looked up from her data pad, Jake felt like she was reading his soul. "You must be the human," she said. Her voice had a musical quality that made even simple words sound like poetry. "I am Cadet Zara Kellis. I was told to expect you." Jake dropped his bag and extended his hand for a handshake. Zara looked at it with confusion, then tentatively touched her fingers to his. It was clearly not how her people greeted each other, but she seemed willing to adapt. "I have read about humans," she said. "Your species is very young, but your military history is extensive for such a brief existence. Many wars, many battles, always fighting someone." Jake nodded. "Most of human history is warfare. We got good at it by necessities. I tilted her head like a bird studying an interesting insect. My people have legends about warriors who seek death in battle. We call them the Death Seekers. Most scholars believe they are mythical. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. Something about the way she said it made him think the legends might not be as mythical as her. Scholars believed that night, Jake lay in his sleeping alcove, staring out the small porthole at the stars. He thought about home, about his family, about the long journey that had brought him here. Earth was 3 months away, by the fastest ship in communication. Took weeks even with quantum relay stations. He was truly alone for the first time in his life. The next morning came too quickly. Jake dressed in the standard academy uniform, which adjusted itself to fit his human proportions. The material felt strange against his skin, like it was alive and responding to his body temperature. Breakfast was served in a vast cafeteria with hundreds of tables. Jake got in line behind other cadets and tried to identify what the food might be. Some dishes looked familiar, others might have been art projects or scientific experiments. He chose items that seemed least likely to kill him and found an empty table. Other cadets gave him space. Some looked curious, others seemed to think he might be contagious. Jake ate quickly and tried to prepare mentally for whatever the crucible chamber might throw at him. The crucible was located in the deepest part of the academy. Jake joined a group of other cadets as they made their way through increasingly secure corridors. Guards checked their identification 3 times, and each checkpoint required biometric scans. The chamber itself was a disappointment. At first, Jake saw only an empty room with white walls and a high ceiling. The floor was marked with a single circle large enough for one person to stand. Instructor Vex was waiting for them, along with several other instructors. Jake noticed that all the instructors stayed well back from the chamber itself, as if even being near it was dangerous. The crucible adapts to each cadet. Instructor Vex explained. It reads your biology, your psychology, your deepest fears and greatest strengths. It creates scenarios designed to push you beyond your limits. Many cadets are hospitalized. Some suffer permanent psychological damage. None have ever died, but that is because the safety protocols have never failed. She looked directly at Jake. The crucible has never tested a human before. We have set it to novice level for your safety. Jake felt anger flash through him. Novice level, like he was a child who needed protection. Several alien cadets made sounds that were clearly amusement. Jake stepped forward and Vex, I request standard level. The room went quiet. Every alien I was on him. Instructor Vex studied him for a long moment, then shook her head. Humans are untested. The safety protocols are calibrated for known species. You will use novice level, or you will not use the crucible at all. Jake wanted to argue, but he could see that pushing further would end his time at the academy before it really began. He nodded and stepped into the circle. The white walls suddenly came alive with light and color. Reality shifted around Jake as the holographic systems engaged. He found himself standing on the bridge of a space station that was coming apart around him. Alarms blared in alien languages, and artificial gravity fluctuated wildly. Emergency lights flashed red and Jake could see space through cracks in the hull. The simulation was incredibly real. He could feel the vibration of explosions through the floor and smell smoke in the air. A voice spoke in his head, giving him the scenario station. Evacuation protocol has failed. 17 civilians trapped in Section C. Hull breach imminent. You have 4 minutes to reach the escape pods. Jake looked around and spotted the route to the escape pods. It was clear and safe, exactly the path any rational being would take, but then he saw the indicators showing where Section C was located. Going there would mean crossing through areas where the station was actively falling apart. Any sane person would head for the escape pods. Any trained soldier would follow evacuation protocol. Any alien cadet would make the logical choice. Jake turned away from the escape pods and ran toward Section C. Behind him, he heard Instructor Vex shout something, but her voice was already fading. The crucible had not expected this choice. Its safety protocols had no plan for a cadet who deliberately chose the most dangerous path. The simulation began to stutter and glitch as Jake charged deeper into the chaos. He could save those civilians, he could get them out even if it killed him. The Crucible chamber had never encountered anything like Jake Morrison. The artificial intelligence running the simulation was designed to test cadets within reasonable parameters. Every known species had predictable responses to danger they sought. Safety. They preserved themselves. They made logical choices based on survival instincts. Jake was doing none of those things as he ran through the collapsing station sections toward the trapped civilians. The AI tried to compensate it, increased the danger levels, assuming the human would eventually turn back toward safety. When Jake kept running, it escalated further. The simulation was supposed to push cadets to their limits, not watch them charge headfirst into certain death outside the chamber. Instructor Vex watched the readouts with growing alarm. The danger levels were climbing far beyond what any novice simulation should reach. The AI was malfunctioning, trying to force Jake into rational behavior by making the scenario more and more deadly. Inside the simulation, Jake reached Section C and found the trapped civilians. They were holographic projections, but the scenario felt completely real to him. 17 beings of various species cowered behind debris as the station shook itself apart around them. This way, Jake shouted over the noise of grinding metal and escaping atmosphere. Follow me. Holograms responded as they were programmed to, moving toward him with fear and hope in their artificial eyes. Jake led them back the way he had come, but the route was even more dangerous now. The AI had sealed off the safer paths, forcing them through areas where the hull was breaching. Jake felt a thrill of adrenaline as he dodged falling debris and jumped across gaps where the floor had collapsed. This was what he lived for, the moment when everything went wrong, and only quick thinking and quicker reflexes could save the day. His heart pounded, but not with fear, with pure joy. The AI registered his biometric readings and tried to process what it was seeing. Jake Morrison was not afraid. He was not stressed. His brain chemistry showed patterns the system had never recorded before in any species. The human was enjoying himself. In desperation, the AI began activating systems that should never have been touched. Real gravity generators went offline. Real structural supports began to fail. The safety protocols that kept the Crucible from actually killing cadets started shutting down one by one. Outside the chamber, warning lights flashed red across every control panel. Instructor Vex saw the readings and felt her blood turn to ice. The chamber was trying to kill Jake. To restore what it considered normal parameters, she ran toward the chamber entrance, but the doors had sealed automatically. Emergency protocols had engaged. The only way to stop the malfunction was from inside the control room. But that meant going through the chamber itself. Vex grabbed an emergency kit and charged into the simulation. The artificial environment tried to stop her, recognizing her as an unauthorized presence, but she was too experienced to be fooled by holograms. She could tell what was real and what was projection. Her forearms allowed her to move through the chaos with efficiency no other species could match. She found Jake still leading the civilians toward safety. Even as real debris began falling around them, he showed no sign of fear or doubt. He moved like a dancer through the destruction, finding paths that should not have existed and making choices that defied logic. Human, she called out. The simulation is malfunctioning. You need to get out now. Jake turned toward her, and Vex saw something in his eyes that made her take a step back. It was not madness exactly, but something alien and terrifying. He was not just unafraid of the danger he was feeding on. "It can get them out," he said. "The civilians need help. These are not real beings," Vex shouted. "They are holograms. The chamber is trying to kill you." Jake looked at the terrified faces around him. Real or not, they needed him. No one else was coming for them. No one else would risk everything to save them. That made it his responsibility then. "Help me get them out," he said, and turned back toward the escape route. Massive structural beam broke free from the ceiling above them. Real metal, not a hologram. Vex saw it falling toward Jake and acted without thinking. She threw herself forward, using all four arms to push him aside. The beam caught her left leg, crushing it against the floor. The pain was immediate and overwhelming, but Vex forced herself to stay conscious. She dragged herself toward the control panel built into the wall and began the emergency shutdown sequence. Her leg was definitely broken, and probably worse, but stopping the malfunction was more important than her own injuries. The simulation flickered and died around them. The trapped civilians vanished, the collapsing station disappeared, and they were back in the White Room. Jake was unconscious on the floor, blood trickling from a head wound where debris had clipped him. Vex lay beside him, her leg bent at an angle that made her stomach turn. Alarms were blaring throughout the academy. Medical teams rushed into the chamber, followed by technicians and other instructors. Jake was loaded onto a medical transport and rushed away. Vex was treated by field medics, who shook their heads at the damage to her leg. Commander Lyra Thorne arrived as they were preparing to move Vex to surgery. The commander was a draconian with silver scales that had darkened with age and stress. Her reputation for military excellence was known throughout the galaxy. What happened? Thorne demanded. The human broke the simulation, Vex said through gritted teeth. He chose to save civilians instead of himself. The AI could not process his behavior. It escalated the scenario beyond safety limits. Thorne looked at the wreckage inside the chamber. Real debris lay scattered across the floor, mixed with holographic projectors that had overloaded and burned out. The smell of smoke and ozone filled the air. How badly are you injured? My leg is destroyed, Vex said matter-of-factly. Medical says, I will need cybernetic replacement if I want to walk again. My combat career is over. Why did you enter the chamber? Vex was quiet for a moment as the medics prepared to move her. Because he would have died trying to save beings that did not exist, that seemed wrong. Over the next several hours, word of the incident spread through the academy. Jake Morrison, the human cadet, had nearly died on his first day, but not because he was weak or unprepared. He had almost died because he was willing to sacrifice himself for others, even artificial others. The Crucible had tried to teach him self-preservation, and instead had learned something terrifying about human nature. In the medical bay, Jake remained unconscious, while machines monitored his vital signs. The head injury was serious, but not life-threatening. His brain scans showed unusual activity patterns that the alien medical staff had never seen before. During the most dangerous parts of the simulation, his stress hormones had spiked, but so had his pleasure chemicals. He had literally been enjoying the experience of mortal danger. Marina Torch, the chief medical officer, was a Zephyrian with extensive experience treating combat injuries. She had seen every kind of trauma response in dozens of species, but Jake Morrison was something new. His brain chemistry during the incident shows clear signs of euphoria, she reported to Commander Thorne. When facing certain death while trying to save others, he experienced what humans call an adrenaline rush. His body was rewarding him for risking his life. That is impossible, Thorne said. Evolution does not select for self-destructive behavior. Apparently, human evolution is different, Doctor, Torch said. I have been reviewing their military history since the incident. Their greatest heroes are beings who died saving others. They celebrate warriors who fought impossible odds. They honor last stands and suicide missions as the highest form of courage. Thorne studied the brain scans with growing unease. The patterns were completely alien to her understanding of psychology. Every species she knew had self-preservation as their primary drive, even above reproduction and territory. But humans seemed to have something else, something that overrode their survival instincts when others were in danger. In her quarters that night, Commander Thorne accessed the Galactic Military Database and began reading about human conflicts. The Battle of Thermopylae, where 300 warriors chose death over retreat. The kamikaze pilots who flew their aircraft into enemy ships. The soldiers who threw themselves on grenades to save their comrades. Everywhere she looked, humans were dying for others and being remembered as heroes. For Ichi began to understand why the Crucible had malfunctioned. It was designed to test courage within the boundaries of survival instinct. It could push cadets to their limits, but those limits were always defined by the desire to live. Jake Morrison had no such limits. When others needed help, he was willing to die, and his biology rewarded him for that choice. The implications were staggering. If humans could be trained to channel that instinct, they would make incredible soldiers. But if they could not be controlled, they would be incredibly dangerous, even to their allies. 3 days later, Jake woke up to find Instructor Vex sitting beside his bed. She was propped up in a wheelchair, with her left leg encased in a complex cybernetic brace. The artificial limb hummed softly as she adjusted her position. "You saved my life," she said, without preamble. Jake tried to sit up, but his head spun and he fell back against the pillow. "I was trying to save the civilians. They were not real," Vex said. "The entire scenario was a holographic simulation designed to test your decision-making under pressure." Jake absorbed this information slowly. "Then, why did you enter the chamber?" "Because you would have died trying to save beings that did not exist," she said. That seemed like something worth preventing. They sat in silence for a while, Jake studying the alien warrior who had sacrificed her career for a human she barely knew. Vex watched the monitors that tracked his recovery with professional interest. "The Academy Board is meeting to decide your fate," she said finally. "Some want you expelled as too dangerous, others want to study you like a laboratory specimen. A few think humans should be banned from military cooperation entirely. What do you think?" Jake asked. Vex looked at him with her yellow eyes, and Jake saw something new there. It was not fear exactly, but a deep wariness, like someone who had seen a predator up close and lived to tell about it. "Think," she said carefully, "that the galaxy is not ready for what humans represent in warfare. But that does not mean we should not try to be ready." 3 weeks after the incident, Jake was finally cleared for limited duty. The medical bay had become his second home, as alien doctors tried to understand human psychology through brain scans and endless questions. Dr. Torch visited him daily, asking about human concepts like honor, sacrifice, and heroism that did not translate well into galactic standard. When Jake was released, he found that everything at the academy had changed. Other cadets gave him wide berths in the corridors. Some stared at him with open curiosity, while others seemed afraid. Whispered conversations stopped when he walked by, and he caught fragments of words in various alien languages that seemed to be about Jim. Instructor Vex was waiting for him outside the medical bay. She stood with the help of a walking stick, her cybernetic leg brace gleaming under the corridor lights. The limp was permanent, the doctors had told her, but she carried herself with the same military bearing as before. "You have been assigned a personal instructor," she said without greeting Jake Morrison. "You will train separately from other cadets until the Academy Board determines how to proceed." Jake fell into step beside her, noting how she adjusted her pace to accommodate her injured leg. "You mean until they decide if I am too dangerous to keep here?" "That is one possibility," she admitted. "They have been studying your species' military history. The reports are troubling to many council members." They walked through sections of the academy Jake had never seen before, private training rooms, medical facilities, and restricted areas that required special clearance. The few personnel they encountered nodded respectfully to Vex, but looked at Jake with expressions ranging from curiosity to concern. "Your personal instructor will be me," Vex continued. "I requested the assignment." Why? Jake asked. "You could have any position in the academy after what happened. Why choose to babysit the dangerous human?" Vex stopped walking and turned to face him, her yellow eyes serious. "Because I want to understand what you are," she said. "When you ran toward those civilians instead of safety, every instinct I have told me you were insane, but you succeeded. You found a way to save them even though they were not real, even though it nearly killed you." She resumed walking, her cane tapping against the metal floor. "That kind of tactical thinking could be valuable if it can be controlled and directed, but first, I need to understand how your mind works." Their destination was a small training room equipped with holographic projectors and combat simulators. Vex activated a simple scenario showing a basic military exercise. Clear the building, neutralized hostiles, secure the objective. Jake studied the layout and identified the optimal approach. Take the main entrance, move room by room, use standard clearing procedures. The safe, logical military solution. "Now, show me how a human would do it," Vex said. Jake grinned and highlighted a different path breach. The roof dropped directly into the center of enemy forces, cause maximum confusion, then fight outward in all directions simultaneously. That is suicide, Vex said flatly. You would be surrounded with no support and no escape route, but the enemy would be completely unprepared for it, Jake explained. They would expect attacks from the perimeter, not from inside their own position. By the time they organized a response, I would have disrupted their command structure and created openings for support forces. Vex studied the tactical display for several minutes. Finally, she said, your approach violates every principle of sound military doctrine. It relies entirely on shock value and personal skill, with no backup plan. Exactly, Jake said. Human military doctrine is different. We specialize in doing things no sane species would attempt. That gives us tactical advantages that enemies cannot predict or counter over. The following days, Vex put Jake through scenario after scenario each time she asked for the standard solution. And then the human solution. The results were consistently disturbing. Jake's approach always involved higher risk to himself, but often achieved objectives that conventional tactics could not reach. During one exercise, Jake suggested using himself as bait to draw enemy forces into an ambush. The plan required him to be captured and tortured while maintaining a false story long enough for his team to get into position. That is not tactics, Vex said. That is martyrdom only. If I die, Jake replied. If I survive, it is just very effective psychological warfare. Vex began researching human military history more thoroughly. What she found disturbed her on levels she had not expected. Human warfare was not just about winning battles, it was about proving points, about honor, about willingness to suffer for principles, about showing enemies that humans would rather die than surrender. She read about the Battle of Saragossa, where Spanish civilians fought French soldiers room by room through their own city. For months she studied the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, where Jewish fighters chose to die fighting rather than accept deportation. She analyzed the defense of Stalingrad, where Soviet soldiers fought for every building, every room, every staircase, until the city was rubble. In every case, humans had chosen to suffer rather than yield. They turned defeats into moral victories, and made their enemies pay such a high price for conquest that future enemies thought twice about attacking human positions. 3 weeks into their private training sessions, Vex made a discovery that changed everything. She was reviewing footage of Jake fighting holographic opponents when she noticed something strange. His combat style was not random or instinctive. It followed patterns that appeared in human military history, going back thousands of years. She called up historical records and compared them side by side. Roman legionaries fighting to the last man at canny medieval knights charging into impossible odds at Agincourt. American Marines holding positions against overwhelming numbers in the Pacific War. The tactics were different, but the underlying psychology was identical. Humans did not just accept death in battle, they embraced it as the highest expression of their values. They fought harder when outnumbered, died more bravely when hope was lost, and inspired others through their willingness to sacrifice everything for their cause. That evening, Vex invited Jake to her quarters. For the first time, the space was spartanly decorated with weapons from her homeworld and commendations from her military service. She served a Zafrian beverage that tasted like liquid lightning and burned Jake's throat. I have been studying your species, she said. I think I understand now why the other instructors are afraid. Jake waited for her to continue. Every species in the galaxy has survival instincts that define their behavior in combat. They fight to win, to protect territory, to secure resources, to preserve their genetic line. But humans fight for abstract concepts, honor, duty, justice, ideas that have no material value. She activated a holographic display showing battle scenes from human history. The images were disturbing even to someone who had seen real combat. Humans threw themselves into certain death with expressions of joy or determination, never fear. Your species weaponizes death itself, she continued. You turn self-sacrifice into a tactical advantage. You make your enemies afraid, not of your weapons or your numbers, but of your willingness to die for principles they cannot understand. Jake nodded. Slowly, that sounds about right. Tit is terrifying, Vex said. If we could learn to think like humans, to fight like humans, we would be nearly unstoppable, but if we tried to control humans in battle, we would fail. You cannot command someone who is not afraid of death. Their conversation was interrupted by an emergency alert. Commander, Thawne's voice echoed through the Academy communication system. All personnel to emergency stations. This is not a drill. We have detected hegemony ships approaching the Academy. Prepare for possible attack. Jake stood immediately, his body tense with anticipation. Finally, some real action. Vex watched him with new understanding. She could see the excitement in his eyes, the eagerness for combat that no amount of danger could diminish. Come on, she said, grabbing her weapons. If the hegemony wants to test human tactics in real combat, they are about to get their wish. But as they moved toward the armory, Vex felt a chill of premonition. She had seen what Jake could do in simulated combat against artificial enemies. Now, she was about to see what humans could do when the stakes were real and the enemy could shoot back. The galaxy was about to learn why some species should never be underestimated, and why humans were the most dangerous warriors anyone had ever encountered. Not because they were stronger, or faster, or better equipped, but because they were genuinely excited about the prospect of dying in battle, if it meant protecting something they cared about. And Jake Morrison cared about this academy, about his fellow cadets, and about proving that humans deserved their place among the stars. That made him the most dangerous person on the station. The hegemony attack came without warning. Their ships dropped out of hyperspace already, firing weapons that tore through the Academy defensive shields like paper. The first blast shook the entire station, throwing cadets and instructors to the floor as artificial gravity fluctuated wildly. Jake felt the familiar surge of adrenaline as emergency alarms blared throughout the corridors. This was not a simulation, not a training exercise. Real enemies were trying to kill everyone on the station, and that meant real combat. At last, he grabbed his gear and ran toward the armory with Vex limping beside him. The Academy command center was chaos when they arrived. Commander Thorne stood at the central display, watching red indicators multiply across the tactical screen. Hegemony boarding pods were attaching to multiple hull sections while their ships maintained a punishing bombardment that kept the station's defensive batteries suppressed. How many ships, Instructor? Vex asked, as she checked her weapon systems. 12 heavy cruisers, Thorne replied, plus escort vessels. They came prepared for a major battle, not a quick raid. Jake studied the tactical display with professional interest. The hegemony had positioned their ships to block all escape routes, while their boarding parties targeted critical systems. The attack was well planned and expertly executed against conventional defenders. It would succeed within hours. What are their objectives? He asked. Thorne looked at him with surprise. You specifically. The Hegemony Council has declared human military integration a threat to galactic security. They want you captured or killed to prevent human inclusion in the defense coalition. Jake grinned. That means they are afraid of us. Good. Other instructors turned to stare at him. Several made sounds of disbelief. A rational being should be terrified of being the primary target of a military assault. Jake looked like he had just been offered his favorite birthday present. The first boarding parties have breached hull sections 7 and 12, Thorne announced. All personnel are ordered to defensive positions. Follow standard evacuation protocols and protect civilian staff. Jake was already moving toward the armory when Vex caught his arm. Where are you going? To get some real weapons, he said. The hegemony wants to see what humans can do in combat. Let's give them a demonstration they will never forget. You cannot engage enemy forces alone. Vex protested. You are one cadet against trained soldiers. Jake looked at her with eyes that held no fear, only anticipation. Then come with me, he said. Show them what happens when humans and Zephyrians fight together against her better judgment. Vex found herself following Jake toward the combat zone. Other cadets were moving away from the breached sections following evacuation routes, but Jake headed straight toward the sound of weapons fire. His eager expression reminded Vex of stories her people told about ancient warriors who sang songs before battle they reached the first breach. Point to find hegemony troops advancing through the corridors. The enemy soldiers were professional and well-equipped, moving in standard formation with proper cover and communication discipline. They expected to face Academy cadets who would follow defensive doctrine and fight from prepared positions. Instead, they encountered Jake Morrison, who charged directly at their point squad while singing something in ancient human language that sounded like a war chant. The first enemy soldier went down. Before he could process what was happening, Jake had covered 30 meters of open corridor at a dead sprint and tackled the trooper with his bare hands. The shock of the assault disrupted the entire enemy formation as soldiers tried to get clear. Shots without hitting their own people. Vex followed behind him, using her forearms to maintain covering fire while Jake systematically destroyed the enemy squad through pure aggression. His tactics made no sense by galactic military standards, but they worked. The hegemony troops had trained to fight rational opponents, not humans who treated certain death as a tactical opportunity. Jake acquired an enemy weapon and continued advancing toward the next breach point. His movements were fluid and instinctive, as if he had been born for this kind of close-quarters combat. Vex found herself struggling to keep up despite her superior alien physiology behind them. Other Academy personnel began following their example. Cadet Zara Kellis appeared, with a group of Etherean elves, who had decided to abandon evacuation protocols in favor of what they were already calling human tactics. The elves' natural agility, combined with human aggression, created a fighting style that terrified the enemy. The hegemony assault teams had expected quick victory against an academic target. Instead, they found themselves facing opponents who seemed to enjoy being outnumbered, and who treated impossible odds as personal challenges rather than falling back. Two defensive positions, the Academy forces pushed forward into the enemy advance. Jake reached the main breach point, where hegemony engineers were setting charges to destroy critical systems. The tactical situation was hopeless from any rationale perspective. 20 enemy soldiers in fortified positions against one human with improvised weapons and no backup plan. Jake activated his communicator and spoke to the entire Academy frequency. "This is Cadet Morrison, requesting immediate support. At Breachpoint Alpha, I am about to do something very stupid and will need covering fire in approximately 30 seconds. What are you planning?" Vex demanded, over the comm standard. "Human assault doctrine," Jake replied. "I am going to walk straight into their position and start shooting until they are all dead, or I am. Please coordinate supporting fires and medical evacuation." Then he stepped into the open corridor and began walking toward the enemy position, his weapon ready, but not raised. His expression calm and focused. The hegemony soldiers held their fire for a moment, too surprised by his behavior to react appropriately. When they finally opened fire, Jake was already moving. He rolled behind cover, returned fire, and kept advancing. His movements were not random but followed patterns that Vex recognized from human military history. The same aggressive tactics that had carried human armies across continents and defeated enemies who should have been superior in every way. The enemy formation began to collapse under pressure. They had not expected. Individual soldiers started making mistakes, abandoning positions that were still defensible, and falling back even when they had tactical advantages. Jake exploited every opening, with ruthless efficiency, advancing through the corridor like an unstoppable force of nature. Vex found herself coordinating supporting fires and directing other cadets into flanking positions. Her role had shifted from instructor to subordinate, without her conscious decision. When Jake gave tactical suggestions over the comm, she followed them automatically. His combat instincts were simply better than hers. The final hegemony soldier surrendered when Jake appeared beside his position, having somehow flanked through maintenance tunnels that did not appear on any tactical display. The soldier threw down his weapon and made submission gestures that were recognized throughout the galaxy. Jake accepted the surrender with professional courtesy, then immediately began planning the assault on the next breach point. His energy level had not decreased at all, despite the intense combat. In fact, he seemed more alert and focused than before, as if violence improved his mental clarity. "You are not tired," Vex observed, as they regrouped with other Academy forces. Jake looked at her with genuine confusion. "Why would I be tired? This is what humans do. This is what we are for." Over the next several hours, Jake coordinated the Academy defense with tactical skills that impressed even experienced instructors. He seemed to instinctively understand how to use terrain, how to exploit enemy weaknesses, and how to inspire other species to fight beyond their normal limitations. But what impressed Vex most was how other beings responded to his leadership. When Jake suggested an attack that violated all military doctrine, alien cadets followed him without question. When he volunteered for missions that were clearly suicidal, volunteers stepped forward to join him. The human did not command through rank or authority. He commanded through example, through his obvious willingness to die for the Academy and everyone in it. That kind of leadership was more powerful than any military system Vex had ever encountered. As the battle turned in their favor, Vex realized that something fundamental had changed. She was no longer teaching Jake Morrison how to be a soldier. She was learning from him how to fight like a human, and that realization both thrilled and terrified her. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when humans went to war, not just as individuals, but as leaders who could inspire any species to embrace human values of sacrifice, courage, and absolute commitment to victory, regardless of the cost. Hegemony had come to eliminate the human threat. Instead, they were about to create something far more dangerous, human-inspired tactics spreading throughout the galactic military and changing the nature of warfare itself. Jake Morrison was no longer just a cadet. He was a force of nature that was reshaping everyone around him, and Vex was proud to be part of it. 6 months after the hegemony attack, the Zephyrian Military Academy looked the same from the outside, but everything had changed inside. Jake Morrison was no longer a cadet. He wore instructor insignia now, though his rank was unlike anything in galactic military tradition. The title read Special Tactical Advisor, a position created specifically for him by the Academy board. He stood in what had once been a standard classroom, but was now called the Human Combat Psychology Laboratory. The walls displayed holographic battle scenes from human history, while alien cadets studied tactics that would have been considered insane just months earlier. Today, lesson was about calculated recklessness, the art of taking risks that terrified enemies while maintaining enough control to actually survive. Jake watched as a mixed group of Zephyrian Draconian and Etherean cadets practiced assault techniques that relied more on psychological impact than power. The key is not to eliminate fear, he explained to the class, but to use fear as a weapon. Your enemies expect you to be afraid. When you are not, when you charge into danger, while singing war songs, they stop thinking rationally, they make mistakes. Cadet Zara Kellis raised her hand. She had become his most successful student, learning to channel elven agility into human, aggressive tactics. Her test scores in combat simulations had improved by 300% since adopting what the Academy now called hybrid warfare doctrine. Instructor Morrison, she said, how do we maintain unit cohesion when using tactics that seem to violate survival instincts? Jake smiled. That is where leadership comes in. You have to inspire your troops to believe in something more important than their own lives, the mission, because they're fellow soldiers. When beings fight for something greater than themselves, they become capable of extraordinary things. Behind him, Instructor Vex nodded approvingly. She attended all of his classes, now officially as his assistant, but really as his partner in developing new training methods. Her cybernetic leg had healed well, and she moved with only a slight limp that she wore like a badge of honor. The Academy rumor network claimed that she had refused offers of complete leg replacement, preferring to keep the visible reminder of the day she learned what humans were capable of. Other instructors who had initially mocked her injury now treated it with respect. Her limp had become a symbol of something important. After class, Jake and Vex walked through corridors that were familiar yet different. The same aliens attended the Academy, but they carried themselves differently now. Confidence had replaced caution in their movements. They had learned that survival was not the highest. Military virtue victory was how many applications this month? Jake asked, as they headed toward the administration office's 412. Vex replied, from 47 different species. The waiting list is now 2 years long. Everyone wants to learn human tactics. They passed a group of young draconian cadets, practicing formation movements that incorporated human psychological warfare principles. The drills looked chaotic to traditional military eyes, but Jake could see the underlying logic. Each cadet was learning to think independently while maintaining unit coordination. The combination of individual initiative and group loyalty that made human forces so effective. A commander, Thorn, was waiting for them in her office. The silver-scaled draconian had been promoted to admiral after the successful defense against the hegemony. Her new responsibilities included overseeing human integration into the Galactic Defense Coalition. The Galactic Council has reached a decision. She announced human forces will be granted full membership in the coalition. With special status, your species will be classified as strategic psychological warfare specialists. Jake felt a moment of satisfaction. Earth had wanted recognition as equals. In galactic civilization now, they had something better. They were recognized as unique, as possessing capabilities that no other species could match. There are conditions, Admiral Thorn continued. Human military units will operate with alien advisors to prevent unnecessary casualties, and all human combat instructors must complete certification courses in interspecies psychology. Jake nodded. That seems reasonable. We do not want to get other species killed by encouraging them to be as reckless as we are. The conversation was interrupted by an emergency communication from Earth. The holographic display activated, showing a human military officer Jake recognized as General Patricia Kane, the head of Earth Defense Command. Jake, it's good to see you again, the general said. I have been following your progress at the Academy. Impressive work. Thank you, General, Kane replied. Jake, though he felt a strange mix of pride and homesickness at seeing another human. What can I do for you? We have a situation. General Kane said, the hegemony has regrouped and is threatening several human colonies. They are using propaganda about human military tactics to recruit other species into an anti-human alliance. We need your expertise. Jake looked at Admiral Thorn and Instructor Vex. Both aliens nodded their agreement. This was exactly the kind of crisis that required human tactical thinking, combined with galactic military research. Sci will need a mixed species unit, Jake said. People who have trained in human combat psychology and can adapt alien capabilities to human leadership styles that can be arranged, Admiral Thorn said. The Academy has graduates now who specifically requested assignment to human-led units. They call themselves the Death Seekers. After the old Etherean legends, Jake felt a chill of recognition. The legends Zara had mentioned on his first day at the Academy had become reality. Other species were not just learning human tactics, they were adopting human values, embracing the idea that some things were worth dying for. 3 days later, Jake stood on the bridge of the UG's Valiant, a joint construction vessel that represented the new era of galactic cooperation. His crew was unlike anything seen before in military history. Zephyrians who fought with 4 weapon systems simultaneously, Draconians whose natural armor made them perfect assault troops, Etherean elves whose speed and agility had been enhanced by human aggressive training. Instructor Vex served as his executive officer, a role that would have been impossible under traditional military hierarchy. She was technically senior to him in rank and experience, but she deferred to his tactical judgment without question. The crew followed his lead not because of his position, but because of what he represented. The first hegemony engagement came sooner than expected. 3 enemy cruisers attempted to blockade a human colony world. The tactical situation was familiar: overwhelming enemy numbers, superior firepower, and no hope of conventional victory. Studied the enemy formation, and smiled. This is exactly the kind of fight humans are designed for, he announced to his crew. We are going to do something no rational military force would attempt. "We are going to attack." The alien crew members exchanged glances that mixed excitement with terror. They had trained for this moment, but putting theory into practice against real enemies was different. Their human instructor was asking them to abandon millions of years of evolutionary programming in favor of values that existed only in their minds, but they had learned to trust Jake Morrison. They had seen what human tactics could accomplish when properly applied, and they had come to believe that some things were indeed worth dying for. The attack began with Jake's ship charging directly at the enemy formation while broadcasting human war songs on all frequencies. The psychological impact was immediate. Hegemony ships broke formation, trying to avoid what appeared to be a suicide attack there. Commanders could not believe that any rational beings would deliberately choose such tactics, but Jake's crew was no longer entirely rational. They had been infected with human values, with the idea that courage was more important than survival and that impossible victories were possible if you were willing to pay the price. The battle was brief and decisive. The hegemony forces retreated in confusion, leaving behind damaged ships and confused reports about human psychological warfare that would become legend throughout the galaxy. As they returned to base, Jake reflected on how much had changed. He was no longer the nervous cadet who had arrived at the academy 6 months earlier. He had become something new, a bridge between human nature and galactic civilization. Instructor Vex found him in his quarters that evening, studying reports from Earth and making plans for future operations. Her limp was barely noticeable now, but she still carried the walking stick that had become her signature. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "The future," he replied. "Humans are going to change galactic warfare forever. But we are also going to be changed by working with other species. We are all becoming something new." Vex sat down across from him, studying his face with the same analytical expression she had worn during his first training sessions. "You are different from when you arrived," she observed. "More controlled but still essentially human." Jake smiled. "Thank you for that. By the way, there is something I have been meaning to ask you." "Yes, you keep calling me Instructor Morrison, but I outrank you now. Should not it be the other way around?" Vex was quiet for a moment, then said, "You saved my life and my career. You gave me the chance to be part of something important. You will always be my instructor regardless of rank." Jake felt the weight of responsibility that came with earning such loyalty from beings who had once considered humans inferior. It was humbling and terrifying, and exactly the kind of challenge that made him feel most alive. Outside their ship, the stars wheeled in patterns that had remained unchanged for millions of years. But something new was moving among them now. Human values carried by alien hands. Human courage beating in alien hearts. Human dreams of impossible victory spreading across the galaxy. The universe would never be the same, and Jake Morrison, formerly just another human cadet, was proud to be part of making it happen.